What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors meets a talk show host who thinks fame means she can say anything she wants? In just 34 seconds, a single cruel comment would destroy years of professional courtesy and expose the ugly truth behind the cameras. This is the story of how Lorraine Kelly pushed too far and watched her reputation crumble in real time. The morning started like any other at the television studio. Hugh Grant had arrived early, dressed in his usual understated way, a simple navy sweater, dark jeans, and that familiar, boyish smile that had charmed audiences for decades. He was there to promote his latest film, a romantic comedy that critics were already calling his return to form. The kind of interview he had done hundreds of times before, but Lorraine Kelly had other plans. As Hugh settled into the bright orange chair across from her, something felt different. The usual warmth that guests expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, Lorraine sat rigidly, her eyes scanning notes that seemed to go on forever. The studio lights felt harsher than usual, casting sharp shadows across both their faces. "Right then, Hugh," Lorraine began, her Scottish accent cutting through the studio air like ice. "Let's talk about this new film of yours. Another romantic comedy where you play the bumbling English gentleman. Don't you think it's time to grow up?" Hugh's smile faltered for just a moment. In all his years of interviews, he had learned to expect the unexpected. But there was something in Lorraine's tone that immediately put him on guard. This wasn't the friendly banter he had been promised by his publicist. "Well, Lorraine," Hugh replied, maintaining his composure, "I think audiences enjoy these stories because they offer hope. In a world that can be quite dark, sometimes people want to believe in love and second chances." Lorraine leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Hope? Or are you just too lazy to challenge yourself as an actor? I mean, let's be honest here. You've been playing the same character for what, 20 years now? When was the last time you actually stretched yourself creatively?" The studio crew exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the lighthearted celebrity chat they had prepared for. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every tense moment as Hugh's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think that's rather unfair," Hugh said, his voice still measured, but with a slight edge creeping in. "I've done quite a bit of dramatic work, actually. Small independent films, television projects. Just because they don't get the same attention as the bigger films doesn't mean they don't exist." "Oh, please," Lorraine scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "Those little vanity projects? Nobody watches those. You make them to feel better about yourself, but at the end of the day, you always come crawling back to the same safe, predictable roles. It's almost sad, really." Hugh blinked slowly, processing what he had just heard. In his entire career, he had faced tough questions, harsh critics, and even scandal. But never had a host been so openly contemptuous during what was supposed to be a promotional interview. The word sad hung in the air between them like a challenge. "I'm sorry," Hugh said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Did you just call my career choices sad?" Lorraine shrugged, seemingly pleased with the reaction she was getting. "If the shoe fits, Hugh, I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. You're 58 years old. Don't you think it's time to stop playing the lovable fool?" The studio had gone completely silent, except for the quiet hum of the cameras. Even the production assistants had stopped moving, sensing that something was about to break. Hugh's hands, which had been resting casually on his knees, slowly clenched into fists. "Everyone else is thinking that, are they?" Hugh asked, his famous charm completely gone now. "And you speak for everyone, do you, Lorraine?" "I speak for viewers who are tired of seeing the same old Hugh Grant performance over and over again," she replied, clearly enjoying herself now. "People want authenticity. They want actors who aren't afraid to take risks. They want someone who can actually act, not just rely on their looks and that tired old stammering routine." Hugh stood up so suddenly that his chair squeaked against the studio floor. The sound echoed through the space like a gunshot. For a moment, he just stared down at Lorraine, who seemed genuinely surprised by his reaction. She had pushed celebrities before, but none had ever responded quite like this. "You know what, Lorraine?" Hugh said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked with some of the most respected directors and actors in the world. I've made films that have brought joy to millions of people, and I've always tried to conduct myself with professionalism and respect." He paused, looking directly into the camera before turning his gaze back to Lorraine. "But I will not sit here and be insulted by someone who seems to have forgotten what basic decency looks like. This isn't journalism. This isn't even entertainment. This is just cruelty for the sake of ratings." Lorraine's confidence was starting to crack. She had expected Hugh to laugh it off, to play along with her aggressive approach. Instead, she found herself facing a man who was clearly done with her game. "Oh, come on, Hugh," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow in the tense atmosphere. "Don't be so sensitive. This is just how television works. We ask the tough questions. We challenge our guests. That's what makes good television." "Good television?" Hugh repeated, his eyebrows raising in disbelief. "Insulting your guests makes good television? Calling their life's work sad and pathetic makes good television? If that's your definition of entertainment, then I think we have very different ideas about what constitutes quality." The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every moment of this unexpected confrontation. What had started as a routine promotional interview was rapidly becoming something much more significant. Hugh Grant, known for his self-deprecating humor and gentle demeanor, was showing a side of himself that few people had ever seen. "Look," Lorraine said, trying to regain control of the situation, "maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over? Talk about the film. Talk about your co-stars. Let's keep this light and fun." But it was too late. Hugh had heard enough. "Light and fun?" Hugh repeated, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "You think you can spend 10 minutes tearing apart my career and then just wave it away with light and fun?" Lorraine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, suddenly aware that she had miscalculated badly. The Hugh Grant sitting across from her was not the polite, accommodating celebrity she had expected to steamroll. This was a man who had reached his limit. "Hugh, please sit down," she said, gesturing toward his empty chair. "Let's just move on. Tell us about working with your leading lady. I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about that." "Our viewers?" Hugh said, still standing, his voice dripping with contempt. "You keep talking about what viewers want, what everyone thinks, but I wonder if you've actually asked them. Or do you just assume they share your appetite for meanness?" The studio crew was frozen. Camera operators kept filming, but their expressions showed they were witnessing something unprecedented. Lorraine Kelly, the self-proclaimed queen of morning television, was being systematically dismantled by her own guest. "I'm not being mean," Lorraine protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm being honest. That's what people expect from me. They trust me to ask the questions others won't ask." Hugh laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Trust? You think people trust you to ambush guests who come here in good faith? To mock their work and call them pathetic? That's not journalism, Lorraine. That's bullying with cameras." "Now you're being dramatic," Lorraine snapped, her facade of control finally cracking completely. "You actors are all the same. The moment someone challenges you, you fall apart. Maybe that's why you stick to those safe little romantic comedies. You can't handle real criticism." The words hit the studio like a physical blow. Even Lorraine seemed to realize she had gone too far the moment they left her mouth. But Hugh just smiled, and somehow that smile was more frightening than any show of anger. "Real criticism," he said slowly, savoring each word. "From someone whose greatest professional achievement is making celebrities uncomfortable on morning television. Tell me, Lorraine, what exactly qualifies you to judge anyone's artistic choices?" Lorraine's face flushed red. "I've been in television for 25 years. I've interviewed everyone from prime ministers to movie stars. I think I know a thing or two about entertainment." "25 years of what exactly?" Hugh continued, his voice calm but devastating. 25 years of sitting in that chair, reading questions someone else wrote, pretending to care about people you've never met? That's not a career, Lorraine. That's just showing up." The silence in the studio was deafening. Production assistants stared at monitors in shock. The camera operators exchanged glances, but kept rolling. This was television history in the making, and everyone knew it. Lorraine tried to recover, forcing her trademark smile back onto her face. "Well, I think someone's letting their ego get the better of them." "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Hugh. You can't handle anyone questioning your precious image." "My image?" Hugh asked, tilting his head slightly. "You mean the image of someone who treats people with basic respect? The image of someone who doesn't use their platform to tear others down for sport? If that's the image you have a problem with, then I think that says more about you than it does about me." He started to turn toward the exit, but Lorraine wasn't finished. Her pride, her reputation, everything she had built over decades was crumbling in front of millions of viewers. Desperation made her reckless. "You know what your problem is, Hugh?" she called out, her voice rising. "You're weak. You hide behind that bumbling charm because you're terrified of showing who you really are. At least I'm authentic. At least I'm not pretending to be something I'm not." Hugh stopped walking. For a long moment, he stood with his back to Lorraine, his shoulders perfectly still. When he finally turned around, his expression was one of complete calm. It was the look of a man who had just heard something so absurd that anger was no longer appropriate. "Authentic?" he said quietly. "Is that what you call this performance? Because that's what this is, isn't it, Lorraine? A performance. You've decided that being cruel makes you seem tough, that being nasty makes you seem honest. But it doesn't. It just makes you seem small." Lorraine opened her mouth to respond, but Hugh held up a hand. "No, let me finish. You want to talk about authenticity? Here's something authentic for you. I came here today to talk about a film I'm proud of, a film made by talented people who worked incredibly hard. I came here expecting the basic courtesy that one professional extends to another. Instead, I found someone so desperate for attention that she's willing to destroy her own reputation to get it." The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every devastating moment of truth. Hugh Grant was no longer the stammering romantic lead from the movies. He was a man in complete control, delivering a masterclass in dignity under fire. "You call me weak?" Hugh continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I've survived scandals that would have ended other careers. I've rebuilt my reputation through hard work and talent. I've earned the respect of my peers and the love of audiences around the world. And I did it all without having to tear anyone else down." Lorraine sat frozen in her chair, her face pale. She had unleashed something she couldn't control, and now it was too late to take back any of it. "But you," Hugh said, looking directly at her, "you've just shown everyone exactly who you really are. And it's not pretty, is it?" The studio remained trapped in absolute silence. Lorraine Kelly, the woman who had built her career on never being at a loss for words, sat speechless as Hugh Grant's question hung in the air like a sword over her head. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, trying to buy time to think of something, anything, that might save her from this disaster. "I think," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "you're overreacting to a simple interview." Hugh shook his head slowly, a look of genuine sadness crossing his face. "Simple interview? Lorraine, do you even hear yourself anymore? Do you remember when you first started in television? When you actually cared about the people you were talking to?" The question seemed to hit Lorraine like a physical blow. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. A memory, perhaps, of the eager young presenter she used to be. The one who had genuinely wanted to connect with people, to tell their stories, to make viewers feel like they were part of something special. "That person is gone, isn't she?" Hugh continued, his voice gentle now but no less powerful. "She's been replaced by someone who thinks cruelty is entertainment, who believes that her job is to hurt people for ratings. And the saddest part is, you probably don't even realize how far you've fallen." Lorraine's composure cracked completely. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and something that might have been shame. "You don't know what it's like to do this job day after day, to keep people interested, to stay relevant in a world that's constantly changing." "You're right," Hugh admitted. "I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to face criticism, to have people question your choices, to wonder if you're still good at what you do. The difference is, I don't take it out on innocent people who are just trying to do their jobs." He moved closer to her desk, not in a threatening way, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won this battle. "You want to know what's really sad, Lorraine? It's watching someone with your talent, your experience, your platform, choose to use it all for destruction instead of creation." "My talent?" Lorraine laughed bitterly. "You just spent the last 10 minutes telling me I have no talent." "No," Hugh corrected her. "I said you are wasting your talent. There's a difference. You could be someone who lifts people up, who makes them feel welcome, who uses her position to spread a little joy in the world. Instead, you've chosen to become someone who tears people down to make herself feel bigger." The production team watched in stunned silence as Hugh Grant, the man they had dismissed as just another celebrity promoting another movie, delivered what could only be described as a moral reckoning. This wasn't just an argument between two famous people. This was a moment of truth that cut to the heart of what entertainment should be. "You know what the truly tragic thing is?" Hugh continued, his voice filled with genuine sorrow. "Your viewers deserve better than this. They invite you into their homes every morning because they trust you to start their day with something positive. And you betray that trust by serving them cruelty instead of kindness." Lorraine tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. "At least I'm not hiding behind a fake persona. At least when people see me, they get the real thing." Hugh paused, considering her words carefully. "The real thing. Is this really who you are, Lorraine? Is this the person your friends know? Your family? Or is this just another character you play? One that you've convinced yourself is more authentic than kindness?" The question pierced through every defense Lorraine had left, because deep down, she knew he was right. This wasn't who she had started out to be. This wasn't the person she saw in the mirror at home. This was a creation, a monster born from years of chasing ratings and trying to stay relevant in an increasingly competitive world. "I think we're done here," Hugh said quietly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. "This is the number for my publicist. When you're ready to apologize, not just to me, but to all the other guests you've treated this way over the years, give her a call." He placed the paper on Lorraine's desk with the gentleness of someone leaving flowers at a grave. "But I won't hold my breath. People like you rarely find the courage to admit they were wrong." Hugh turned toward the exit, but then stopped one final time. When he looked back, his expression was no longer angry or sad. It was simply tired. You know what the real tragedy is in all this? You had the chance to be remembered as someone who made the world a little brighter. Instead, you'll be remembered as the person who chose to make it darker. He began walking toward the studio door, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. But Lorraine wasn't finished. Desperation and wounded pride drove her to make one last fatal mistake. "Running away, Hugh?" she called out, her voice cracking with false bravado. "Just like you always do when things get difficult?" Hugh stopped but didn't turn around. For 5 seconds that felt like an eternity, he stood perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute finality. "No, Lorraine, I'm not running away. I'm walking away. There's a difference. Running implies fear. Walking implies choice. And I choose not to waste another moment of my life in the presence of someone who has forgotten how to be human." With that, Hugh Grant walked out of the studio, leaving behind a broken host, a stunned crew, and television history. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Lorraine Kelly sitting alone at her desk, staring at the piece of paper he had left behind. In those final moments, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in, viewers could see something they had never seen before on morning television. They saw a bully realize that their victim had become their judge, jury, and executioner. They saw someone who had built their career on making others uncomfortable discover what true discomfort felt like. And in the silence that followed Hugh Grant's exit, they heard the sound of a reputation dying, one word at a time.